Excellent. Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to our second of 4 survivorship wellness series, this one being coping with anxiety. I'd really like to thank everyone for participating. Without kind of getting too detailed, but we do have the survivorship team on the slide. The nurse practitioners for survivorship are Alonja Cassidy, Allison Paget, who spoke a few moments ago, and then Hannah Eppensteiner, waving at the bottom. Hello, Allison. And then that's a picture of myself, Aaron Statt. I'm the survivorship nurse navigator. I'm usually the point of contact initially reaching out to schedule appointments. But a little bit about the survivorship program, if you aren't familiar, we're meant to be a continuity of care, meant to kind of transition you from active treatment to surveillance and follow-up. Oncology diagnoses can be scary. When you're going through treatment, you're being told what's to happen, treatments, radiation, all those things. But really towards the end of treatment, the visits aren't as frequent. So that's where we kind of transition to kind of pick up and help you just kind of be an advocate for you moving forward. We obviously do our wellness visits, survivorship visits, where our nurse practitioners and myself put together a very detailed care plan and treatment summary. This shows you what to expect with active surveillance moving forward. The treatment summary is a highlight of everything that's been done intervention-wise from your diagnosis through treatment, and then what to expect. And then, of course, really just a really in-depth conversation where we establish that relationship and really just get to know you and find out exactly what you need and what accesses to resources within the hospital network, and then obviously in the community, because there's so much out there for you available to you. We also do obviously these wellness series, which are a very, very crucial part of our program. And then we do have wonderful community engagement, and then of course, patient advocacy. We are here for you 24 hours a day. So if you ever have questions and need any answers, we definitely are always available. And at the end of this presentation, there'll be some contact information as well. But again, if you do go to the website, christhospital.com, and search survivorship, our contact information is there as well, okay? So now to the guest of honor, if you will. We are going to be introducing Georgia Anderson. We're super excited to have her do this program for us tonight. Georgia joined the Cancer Family Care in 2021 after completing her PhD of social work at the University of Louisville in May 2021. Her research focuses on how living with cancer impacts family functioning across the trajectory of illness. Her dissertation study is entitled The Lived Experience of Women with Head and Neck Cancer and the Impact on Close Relationships. Prior to earning her doctoral degree, Georgia spent 16 years in community mental health, outpatient oncology social work, oncology support group facilitation, palliative care and end-of-life care, and hospital social work administration. In her free time, she enjoys cooking, music, spending time with her husband, kids, dogs, and foster kids. So without delaying too much, Georgia, we'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, and then I'm going to
there we go.
stop.
There we go. I almost wore that same outfit tonight. I must really like that animal print sweater, so I'm glad I had a second thought about that. So thank you for the nice introduction, and I am so pleased to be here. It's really an honor to be asked to be a guest speaker, and so I still get giddy when I get referred to as an expert, and knowing that this is being recorded and that you all might want to binge watch and go back and watch it again, I will try to make this really useful and helpful. So the presentation is laid out. I want to sort of define. So I really am going to hone in on fear of recurrence, because that seems to be how a lot of anxiety manifests at this stage of the game. And then, so that part will be more kind of lecture. And then the second half is going to be, what do we do about that? So certainly feel free to jump in if you want to pop a hand up, or if you want to put a question in the chat box. And Allison and Aaron, if you can help me manage that and sort of help me field those questions in case I miss them. But I am hopeful that this will be interactive. I don't want y'all to feel like I'm just talking at you the whole time. Okay. So let me see if I can share my slides. So as I said, I know the main title for the survivorship series is fear of anxiety. but I was asked to speak specifically about fear of recurrence. So before I get into that, I want to do just a quick, nope, don't want to do that. Okay, sorry. We'll do a quick plug for my agency. So I work for Cancer Family Care. So we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. So Cancer Family Care is a nonprofit, primarily grant-funded agency that provides counseling, educational, and more emotional support to all people who are affected by cancer. And we do that through 4 different sort of branches. The first is the Center for Individual and Family Counseling, Treehouse Children's Services, Coping Connection, which is pretty much if someone calls in and they need help finding resources, or they're just not sure where to start in their cancer journey, we will help provide resources and get them pointed in the right direction. And then finally, we have the Waddell Family Healing Hands program. So through that program, people who are actively in cancer treatment are able to get healing touch and massage appointments at no cost. And then caregivers and people who are in survivorship are able to access those services at a reduced rate. So with that said, tonight, what I'm hoping that we can do is just define and understand what is fear of recurrence. We'll explain what that looks like in people with cancer and their caregivers, and we'll talk about some different coping strategies. So the big question, what is fear of recurrence? So I pulled lots and lots of research or articles, and it boiled down to this: a fear of your disease recurring or progressing in the same organ or a different area of your body, right? So that's like pretty much the most straightforward academic definition I've ever found. But when I think about it, it's sort of that waiting for the other shoe to drop phenomena, where, as Allison and Aaron were talking about, when you get a cancer diagnosis, everything moves very quickly. You see the doctors a lot, you see your medical team a lot, and it's sort of like a freight train. It just go, 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 and you just go through the steps. But then when you enter into the survivorship phase, there's time to think about what you've been through and what might happen in the future. So that's what fear of recurrence can look like. So how does that fear of recurrence present itself? So several different ways. So there can be changes in your physical functioning. You might have some changes at work. So I've had some folks describe to me, you know, I used to love my job, but now I feel like maybe my job doesn't matter. I mean, I've had cancer. What am I doing with my life? Schlepping into this office every day. Death. So some folks get preoccupied with death. Some folks get completely avoidant of dealing with death. So maybe they won't go to family funerals because that fear is too raw and too real. Compromised beliefs. So some folks experience what I would call an existential crisis. So that might be, why did God let this happen to me? Or I'm a good person, I did everything right, why did I get cancer? Or some folks are, well, maybe I deserve this. Maybe this is my way of doing penance for not being the best person I could be. Sometimes it presents as having control issues. So really trying to overmanage lots of different aspects of your life. Because we know loss of control is one of the psychological impacts of having a cancer diagnosis. A feeling that you have lost control. So sometimes when there's a fear of recurrence happening, you really overcompensate and try to control and maybe even micromanage lots and lots of other aspects of your life. You might notice this in your family. So the way you relate with others and the way they relate to you might be different. Changes in coping. So maybe things that you had typically done to deal with hard times don't seem to be as effective. So changes in how you cope, and then also differences in cognitive and behavioral functioning. So that might be changes in your sleep patterns, changes in your eating habits, exercise habits. Maybe you were always sort of a laid back person and now you find that you're struggling with anxiety or panic attacks, or perhaps even moving into the areas of meeting criteria for clinical depression. Those are all common and symptoms, if you will, of fear of recurrence. So how common is it? So this, I really want this to be the takeaway. It's really super, super, super common. So I pulled 2 systematic analyses. So what those are, it's where a researcher does a very detailed search for all of the research articles that have been done on a particular topic, and then they sort of aggregate all of those together to see if there were similar findings, or to kind of take all these different kinds of information and put them all together in one study. So in 2 of those, it found that there was between 22 and 99% of people who are diagnosed with cancer experience some kind of fear of recurrence. So at first when I looked at that, I was like, 22 to 99%, that's an awfully big range. But the takeaway for that to me is that it's really, really common. So you're looking at anywhere from about a quarter to almost 100%. So really it's like that 1/4% of people who don't experience are sort of more of the outliers, that it really is a common experience for about 75% of folks who have been diagnosed with cancer. And part of that, rates of low to moderate worry were reported up to 5 years after diagnosis in many people. So this is not only really common that people have these feelings, but it's not uncommon that those feelings stay with you for a while. And a lot of the studies were conducted in the breast cancer population. However, there were diagnoses from across the cancer spectrum represented in these studies. It just seemed that the bulk of the studies they were able to find about this phenomena had occurred in the breast cancer literature. All right. So, all right. So what does this look like for people who have been diagnosed with cancer? So these studies, when they sifted through them, found that there was one group of people that sort of bubbled up that were least likely to report fear of recurrence, or they experienced it at lower rates. And then there was another group of folks that were more likely to report it, or they reported it more often. So older people are less likely to have a fear of recurrence. And the thought behind that is older folks, and between the studies, I couldn't find a hammered down age for what does older people mean. So I would say probably the average when I looked through those studies was 65 and older is what they're considering to be older. But they framed that in this concept that people had raised their children, that they were more in their retirement years, so they were less likely to worry about if the disease came back because they felt like they had lived a lot of their life. People who are partnered tend to have less fear of recurrence. People with higher levels of education. Men who had never fathered children tended to report it less often. And African American people, or people of color, were less likely to report fear of recurrence. However, we see a higher instance in younger people, people who have fewer years of survivorship. So people that are fresh out of treatment and still kind of working through some of those residual side effects from treatment are more likely to have fear of the disease coming back. People who have had chemotherapy as their treatment tend to have higher fear. Women with few significant relationships, so more isolated, or not a strong sense of support around them. People with children, and specifically people with young children, reported higher levels of fear of recurrence. So those are sort of the family dynamics or personal characteristics, but then medical influences that make it more likely that for fear of recurrence to be a struggle is the amount of time from diagnosis and treatment. So as I said in the slide before this, if you are closer to the time of your diagnosis and treatment, that anxiety still runs pretty high. Having chemotherapy, if you are experiencing residual side effects either of your disease or your treatment, you are more likely to have fear of recurrence. And the rationale behind that is because your cancer experience is not fully behind you in the rearview mirror, because you're still dealing with it in present time. So that adds to that fear that it's going to come back. Folks who had poorer general health, so if they have other comorbidities, so diabetes, heart problems, severe arthritis, other kinds of health conditions that would make their health not as good as they would like it to be, tend to have higher instances of fear of recurrence of their cancer. And having any kind of symptom burden, which goes along with that side effect. So if you are still having perhaps like lymphedema, or severe neuropathy, those might predispose you to being more inclined to fear of recurrence. And I want you to keep in mind while I'm talking about all this, this is like that game of averages. So just because this is what happened when we look at a bell curve, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to have it, although we know that there's a pretty big hunk of folks, but it might look different for every person. Okay. So the psychosocial influences, characteristics of people who are more likely to experience fear of recurrence. What are those? So there's lots of them. So if you're already sort of a neurotic kind of person that was always worried, you might be more inclined to experience this. If you've had stressful life events, and I always tell my clients, life doesn't stop, divorces don't stop, other people's illnesses, broken appliances, all those things happen when you have cancer. So having a lot of those stressful life events on top of recovering from cancer can certainly make you more inclined to experience fear of recurrence. Family distress, so whether that's centered around your cancer or other kinds of family issues, that can tip the scales. People who are more likely to be in denial about their disease, or who never want to talk about it, or have not ever really processed their feelings about having cancer, might be more likely. I'm going to go back to these other two blue ones, but you might have more severe consequences and stronger emotional representations of illness. So people who are more likely, so I always use my own family, for example. I love my grandmother with all of my heart, but if you get a paper cut, she is going to tell the rest of the family that you nearly cut your finger off, that it was a miracle, that it didn't just fall off right on the floor, and that you didn't have to get stitches. I mean, like, she just always goes to the worst case scenario of an illness. So certainly that sort of mindset might make you more inclined to have a fear of recurrence. If you experience a new or an ongoing side effect and pain in particular as a result of your cancer, that makes sense to me that you're fearful that your cancer has come back if you're having new pain or another side effect that you didn't have before you had cancer. I thought this one was interesting, thinking of cancer as a chronic condition. So I always see that as an asset of sort of thinking about it like, okay, this is not an immediate life or death diagnosis as it has been in the past. People live a much longer time with cancer. But these studies found that when folks think of cancer as a chronic condition, sometimes that makes them more likely to experience fear of recurrence. People with low self-esteem tend to gravitate into this group. And then post-traumatic stress disorder, I mean, that PTSD is a diagnosis that is not to be taken lightly, but there are certainly people who experience PTSD symptoms after having a cancer diagnosis. And when you look at the definition of what does it mean to have PTSD, it means you've had a real or perceived threat to your life. And having had that experience makes you hypervigilant to protect against further injury in the future. So that is where folks can have sort of these thoughts about, I think about, you have to go back to the same area that you had your initial scans to go get your surveillance scans. That can be a triggering event, or people who avoid. I have had clients in my career who will not even drive on the same road as their cancer center because they just don't even want to look at the building. Having certain kinds of coping skills to people that typically avoid. So I always call these the ostriches, like where they just stick their head in the sand and just want to act like nothing ever happened. Depressive coping, which is when folks are not able to find any positive, which not that having cancer is a positive experience. And I certainly don't mean to make light of embracing the seriousness of it, but when folks just can't get past the sadness and grief. And people that have active problem coping. So what that is folks that like I need an immediate solution right now, and things are very black or white, and they're very uncomfortable in the gray area as things process, tend to have a harder time with fear of recurrence. And having poor physical or mental health before you had a cancer diagnosis is a sort of a predisposition to being more inclined to be afraid of a recurrence. And then finally, having less perceived meaning in the cancer experience. So there's this emerging field. So we've talked about post-traumatic stress disorder, but a new field is post-traumatic growth. And so what that means is making meaning out of your cancer experience, and post-traumatic growth has been applied in other areas besides cancer. But in oncology, they looked at, are people able to make meaning, or I always struggle to use the word benefit finding, because I mean, obviously, if you could just bypass the whole cancer experience, I think most people would be like, yeah, I'm cool. I'm going to press the button and just skip through that part of my story. But being able to find meaning. So for example, in my dissertation, many of the women described really learning who their friends are and seeing who is there to support them or give them physical or material help when they needed it was a benefit of cancer, because it really helped them see who was there to support them. So again, are there folks who are a little neurotic? And like, I always think of, like Jerry Seinfeld and all of his buddies on the Seinfeld show. Like, I think any of them might kind of fit this profile of being more likely to be worried about and have anxiety about their cancer returning. But that's not necessarily a slam dunk, just because you might sort of, and any of us, I mean, any person can fit in any of these little boxes at any given time in their life. So then we asked, what does this look like for caregivers or loved ones? So we found that there are higher rates of fear of recurrence in caregivers who perceive that their loved one is suffering, either physically or emotional. And I always describe this as if you've ever taught anyone how to drive and you're sitting in that passenger seat and you're pumping that imaginary brake. I often use that analogy for caregivers or loved ones, because as the person with cancer, you know exactly how you feel, emotionally and physically. And even though you might communicate that with your caregiver, they still have some of that feeling of being out of control. So yeah, they have that emergency brake, but at the end of the day, they're not holding onto the steering wheel. So that provokes a lot of anxiety. And for caregivers who have poor physical or mental health prior to cancer, their own health, if they are inclined to not be as well, may be more inclined to experience fear of recurrence. All right, so that is sort of part one of just sort of giving an overview of what is fear of recurrence. So before I go on to, okay, great, now we know what it is, what do I do about it? Are there any questions or comments or experiences of this that you would feel comfortable sharing? We'll field some questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Allison, Erin, do you all have any questions popping up that you see?
I don't see any. I can allow the mic for attendees. I don't know if that'll help, or if we prefer to just use that chat box.
However is easiest for you to manage is totally fine with me. I'll just go along for the ride on that.
Yeah, I think it's probably easier. With my lack of superior knowledge of technology, I don't want to screw anything up. So, but there aren't any specific questions on the meeting chat.
Okay.
So yeah.
Great. So we will go forward, and if you think of questions, because I know I moved through that kind of fast, but I don't want to dwell on the symptoms. I want to talk about what do we do to push through that. So how to cope, like really, how do we cover up in that storm? So the number one thing, and I swear if I could print t-shirts and hand these out to folks, I would. There is not a right or wrong way to have cancer. So everybody has their different groove for how they deal with hardship, and coping with a cancer diagnosis and living through that and past that is no different. So give yourself grace to feel whatever your feelings are. I think society, we tend to be uncomfortable with some of those ugly, what we consider ugly emotions. So anger, fear, sadness, those are ones that we sort of like to brush through pretty quickly. Because when you ask someone, are you okay? And they say, no, not really. One of the first responses, oh, it'll be okay. Well, I don't know if it's going to be okay. It's all right to have whatever feelings you're having. Give yourself time to process those feelings. I have found that many people seek therapy or group support after they have finished their course of treatment for cancer. One, because they're so busy. I mean, it's like a full-time job, getting to all those appointments and getting to the treatment and managing the side effects and dealing with your energy levels, that you may just not have. Well, yeah, I like that little smiley face in there. Thank you. You may not have time to even stop and really think about, what does this experience mean? But then when treatment's over and you're not going to the doctor so much, that's when you really have time to think about what you've been through and what might happen in the future. So give yourself time to process those feelings. If you're having, I think people are social creatures, so seeking out someone who can support you. So whether that's a trusted friend, or a family member or a professional to help you sort through those feelings is completely appropriate and normal. I have several clients who come to see me for counseling because they said they would just rather talk to somebody who's not emotionally involved in their story to help them sort through all the things that they are feeling. And know that being concerned about, is this cancer going to come back? Or is my life, am I ever going to feel good again? Or is my energy going to get better and go back to how it was? Or is my appetite going to be better? Or am I ever going to be able to sleep through the night? Or am I ever going to get a cold and not wonder if it's something more sinister? So just know that that is normal. So coping strategies. I loved this visual because calm and panic really are just like a slight toss of the dice away from each other, right? And that could be with anything in life. But what are some things that you can do to manage? And I think this is a good practice, whether it's fear of recurrence, or I'm worried because I'm getting a new job, or I'm moving into a new house, or I'm starting a new relationship, or I have something in life ending. Some of the things that can be helpful, write it down, all of it, the good, the scary, the painful, the weird, it all counts. I recommend this strategy a lot for folks, especially if you're the kind of person who really gets inside your head and you have all these thoughts, kind of like the gerbil running on the wheel all the time. It's really nice to purge all that stuff out. And I make lists. I don't really like to journal write with full paragraphs and all that. That feels too fancy. I just make lists. But also what that does is it names the things you're worried about. So I use the analogy, it's like when you were a kid, or if you had kids that have kids that are afraid of the dark and they're sure there's a monster on the bed. They're terrified that that monster is under the bed until you come in and turn on the lights, or you shine a flashlight underneath the bed and you look and you put you put that fear in the light. It becomes a lot less scary when you name it. Thank you, Allison, for troubleshooting that. So another recommendation is get moving. So you don't have to be training for a marathon or doing P90X or, whatever the cool workout is for the minute. Just taking a walk, stretching. If you feel like working out, or in my house, we're a big fan of kitchen dance parties. But some sort of physical movement, when you make that connection between your mind and your body, it helps alleviate that anxiety. So part of the reason for that, many people describe when they get a cancer diagnosis, they feel that loss of control. And the number one thing they feel out of control about is their own person, right? Because we are taught from day one that we are the boss of ourselves. We are the master of our own body. We get to decide what we do with our bodies. So when your body gets an illness, there is this sense of almost betrayal that your body didn't do what it was supposed to do. So through movement, not only is it good for you from a physical standpoint, it really is good because it connects your mind and your body. So you physically are showing your mind, look, I am still capable of doing some things. It may be different, so maybe you were a marathon runner and maybe now 5 miles is just really the most you can do right now. That's okay. But getting out there and moving and being connected to your body, even if it's just like a really good stretch in the morning or throughout your day or before you go to bed, something that helps you connect to your physical body. Going along with that is nurturing yourself. Try to eat well. Try to get good sleep. And I know sometimes that's easier said than done. And I'm not saying sometimes some biscuits and gravy or a milkshake are not going to be what nurtures you, but really fueling your body with good, healthy food that helps in your recovery process and helps your body move through recovery into living healthy throughout the rest of your life. Sleep is also really restorative. When we are not sleeping well, we are more prone to anxiety and depression. So having some tips, and that's something that there are lots and lots of, I recommend guided imageries. There's lots of, or guided meditations on YouTube, or there's lots of podcasts with really soothing sort of presentations to help you sleep. Enjoying a hobby. So really finding something that makes you happy to do. So listening to music, enjoying nature, reading a book, something that brings you joy. I always share, like, I love to watch birds, which is the strangest thing to me because I always used to just kind of think that was a weird hobby, but I have become obsessed with hummingbirds. So I feed them. I have a group of them. It's not a flock. They're called a charm. So I have a little charm of hummingbirds that hangs out at my house all summer. And I have found that really is a nice way to stay present and in the moment, because you have to notice what's right there in front of you. I have a friend who not only does she knit, but she goes to these farm retreats where they shear sheep, or you can get llama hair, and she spins her own yarn to knit with, which is taking it to the extreme, but I mean, it makes her happy. And she's somebody who's struggled with anxiety our whole lives. And that is something that's really helped her to find a calmness and a peace. People. So this is one of those things sometimes, and especially this pandemic has really changed at the way we connect with other people, or has created more isolation than might be good for our mental health. But I think finding ways to spend time with supportive people. So even if that includes virtual hangouts with your friends or outside, because some folks are still not comfortable being inside together, but finding a way, or even picking up a phone, texting a friend. Excuse me, hiccups. Excuse me 1 second. All right, there we go. I think I'm good. But finding a way to connect with other people is a good way to help cope with anxiety. And setting limits. This, I think, is good practice whether you have been sick or not, but allow yourself to say no to things that you don't want to do. And it's okay. You don't have to qualify it. Somebody invites you to their cat's birthday party. You might love that friend, you might love their cat, but you are just not feeling going to a cat birthday party. It's okay to say, thank you so much for the invite, but I'm not going to be able to make it. And that's the end of it. You don't have to tell them, like, I think it's weird to make a birthday party for a cat, or yes, Nicole, I love your feedback. No is a full sentence. I agree. And I have sort of trained my family that if I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. And to not worry about that I'm doing anything out of obligation or that I really don't want to, because I will tell them if they invite me or ask me to do something and I don't want to do, no, thank you. And we go on with life. that is very freeing, and that really helps with anxiety because then it sort of cuts that chain of feeling obligated. Okay. But wait, there's more. Okay, so some more coping skills. Yoga and Tai Chi, I recommend to many of my patients. And again, it's for that same reason as doing any other kind of physical activity. They're really, and yoga and Tai Chi in particular, really focus on connecting your mind and your body and helping get those two things in sync. Massage is a great way to alleviate stress. Our bodies tend to carry our anxiety and worry in various places on our body. That is something, as I have practiced as a social worker over the years, that I try to do for myself regularly. And I was amazed that I carry a lot of my tension in my hands. Apparently, I clutch my hands a lot. So my massage therapist has this spot that they hit on my hand, and my whole arms and hands go limp. Healing touch is really great. So that is healing touch and Reiki, both are energy work, which I first got into this field and thought that was a little hippy dippy or strange, but there are actually lots of research articles that show that there is benefit to those kind of treatments. Prayer and meditation. There are also many, many research articles that talk about the healing and restorative power or prayer or meditation. So whatever that looks like for you, that those kinds of activities not only help connect your mind and your body, but also help connect you to something or someone higher, which studies show that when people feel that there is some sort of authority or higher power or meaning in the world, that helps eliminate the stress that they're feeling in their individual lives. And then I mentioned this earlier, guided imagery or relaxation. If you never have tried that, I really recommend it. Again, YouTube is a great resource, which, I mean, I have young kids that manage to find all the garbage on YouTube, but in the middle of all the garbage on YouTube, there are lots of really nice guided imagery. So, you know, sometimes it's imagine yourself by a stream or on the beach, but there's all sorts of different kinds. So whatever sort of scenery or mood is what helps you relax, I would encourage you to try something like that. So knowing it is healthy to seek help, you know, and I always use the perspective of you sought help for your physical illness of cancer. It is totally fine to seek help for mental health distress. So many of these coping strategies that I described sort of counter the symptoms of depression and anxiety. But if you find that you are not able to enjoy things that you have always enjoyed in the past, or you tend to isolate, it's one thing if you've always been an introvert and like to be by yourself, but if, I see a message that someone's having trouble with the audio. Is anybody else having trouble hearing?
I can hear you still.
I can hear you still.
Okay. All right, cool. Looks like it's fixed. Okay. Lost my train of thought. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you know, you were able to seek professional help to treat your cancer. So it is okay to treat the mental health impacts of cancer, and it is okay sometimes an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication can help as you work through that process. And I think it's important to remember that depression and anxiety are not just something that you make up. There is a chemical component in your body with, you have lots of different levels of different kinds of chemicals that influence how you feel emotionally. So just like having a baby might cause postpartum depression and might get your body chemistry off balance, going through cancer and cancer treatment can very much do the same sort of thing. So there is no shame in seeking out consultation with a physician if medication might be indicated, or talking to a therapist. Those are all healthy things to do. So how do you know when you might need that professional support? So just to piggyback on that. So if you have avoidance behavior, so that can be avoiding people, that can be avoiding medical follow-up appointments, that can be avoiding ever thinking or talking about your cancer. And by that, I don't mean you don't have to, I mean, I certainly hope there comes time when it's not an everyday or multiple times a day occurrence where you think of cancer. But when those thoughts are coming up and pushing those down and not wanting to process or think about those thoughts or feelings is what I mean by avoidance behavior. If you become hyper vigilant for the recurrence of symptoms, so this is something to really, there's a balance to this, because one, I think no one is a better expert about your body than you. You know when something feels off, or that a part of your body is not working the way that you know that it should. So it's one thing to be an advocate for yourself and say, you know, I just feel like something's not right. But if that crosses over into almost like a hypochondria sort of behavior, where every bruise, you're certain, you know, you're bruising because your counts are not working right, or every time you get a headache, you're concerned that it's metastases of a recurrent cancer, or every cough is because there's lung cancer. When that is the first thought all the time, every time, that is when it moves from normal, like, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to my body, into an arena where you might need a little bit of help reframing those concerns. If there is an inability to plan for the future. So I have some folks that will say to me, I used to look forward to going on vacation every year, but I can't even begin to plan the trip because I'm worried I'm not going to be alive to go on that trip. And particularly when you're in a survivorship part of the cancer journey, to have those thoughts that you just can't plan for the future, or you can't imagine where you'll be in 5 years. If you have gotten the medical advice that you will likely have a long future, but you're still not able to make plans for fear of your cancer coming back, that might be a time to seek out some extra support. And if you have persistent problems with sleep, eating, concentration, finding pleasure in things you used to like to do, feeling hopeless or helpless, and rejecting support from loved ones, those are all textbook symptoms of depression. And I think that it would be wise to seek some professional support with those situations. So these are my references, and I emailed my slides to Allison. So if there's anyone who is interested in having a copy of these slides, I am fine to share those. And Allison, you may share those with whomever asks. And then finally, I'm mentioning resources. So the 3 main resources that I refer folks to is the American Cancer Society. You can call that phone number and they have support available 365 days a year. And their website, if you can't find it on their website, you don't need it. I mean, they really have a lot of great information on their website. Cancer Family Care, you can give us a call or go to our website, and we will be happy to get you scheduled with a therapist who specializes in oncology. And then there's also the Cancer Support Community, which I always think of as sort of our sister agency. They provide group support and education programs for people coping with cancer, who are people who are impacted by cancer. And I know that both Cancer Family Care and Cancer Support Community are able to provide virtual appointments or virtual support groups. Cancer support community has some hybrids where you can choose to go in the building or participate in person. Some of the groups are still all virtual. And cancer family care, it's the same thing. If you're comfortable coming to the office, we will gladly see you here. All of our staff is fully vaccinated. We will wear masks during the session if that is what is most comfortable, or we can do virtual visits. So that is my formal presentation, but I would love to open up the floor and just have a conversation and get some feedback. Did I get it right? Maybe what were your experiences of this? And maybe we can just talk in more detail or answer any questions that might have come up.
I think that, well, since no one else is saying anything yet, with seeing survivors a lot throughout the week, I think this kind of overarching fear, I see it a lot, and it's really challenging to kind of get through when everyone's so different on what they feel like they need, and even being introspective of enough to know what you need and what works for you and coping mechanisms and all that jazz. So I definitely think that this is something that needs to be more widely known, not only to the cancer, survivorship realm, but everyone, because there's still that stigma of mental health and counseling and stuff like that, I think, out there, which is really unfortunate, because I think a lot of times, it's just so important. I think all of us, like, I joke, like, when you're married, you should just automatically get a counselor, or any kind of ups and downs, you just automatically should get a counselor, and just to not burden your loved ones sometimes, and they don't quite know the answers to, or what you want them to say always. So,
well, and sometimes, so I saw 2 comments pop up. So I saw one person say they have a hard time being idle. And that I saw another comment that the coping strategies were spot on, but sometimes it's hard to remember to do those when you're in the throes of anxiety. So I appreciate that feedback. So will you say more about being idle? Like, is it like you just don't have the energy, or is it that you have more free time than you had before?
and I can see if I can make it so everyone can actually allow the mic, so that if they want to talk, if you don't want to, you can always still use the chat box, but actually I'll allow the cameras too, so if anyone wants to see each
When I'm
other.
idle, nothing to do, my anxiety rears up. That makes sense. I have a lot of folks tell me that they're fine during the day. But then, like, at night when they lay down to go to sleep, that's when things really kick in. So this always sounds like the silliest thing, but I really had the best luck. Well, it's not really luck. I like to say, it's well-researched sort of intervention, but I tell folks to set a timer on your phone for like 10 minutes and let yourself go down the rabbit hole. Like, catastrophize the whole thing. Like, let your mind go to the worst case scenario and, like, really just let your brain go there. And it kind of stinks. It's a little scary. It can be one of those things that make the tears come, but, like, you can tolerate anything for 10 minutes. I feel like that's a pretty good rule of thumb. We have all gone to doctor's appointments or dentist appointments, and it's like 10 minutes. I could just 10 more minutes and I can live, or like a class that we've sat through, or, sitting in a restaurant waiting 10 more minutes for food that you really want. So for 10 minutes, just let your brain go there. And I recommend to write it down, because it really is like shining that flashlight on the monster under the bed when you name it. And I've had folks that they're like, I know my doctor says I'm fine, and that, like, based on averages, this cancer is probably not going to come back and I'm going to have a great life. But learning to set limits and writing has helped me. Thank you. But really, like, writing it down and then looking at it, and I always say kind of step away from it, like, write it down, timer goes off, leave it.
Mhm.
and either come back to it, like if you do it in the morning or at night, look at it again. And sometimes it's like, okay, and like, I know I do this. I am wound tight. I am like wound tighter than an 8-day clock on many occasions. And I think going back to grad school made me super crazy. So like, I find that writing it down and then I go back and look at it, I'm like, none of this stuff is going to happen. Like, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, like, it might happen, but it's probably not going to happen. So then I'm able, and like, I think it's really cathartic after you write it down, crumple it up, throw it in the fire pit. If you got little kids, let them shred it up, put it in the bottom of the bird cage. Like, it's very cathartic to like name those fears and then chuck them, you know?
I was
I saw
just
several
thinking too, Barb was saying that, it's almost like we know so many things to do to be this perfect, healthy person, to not only be perfect as a person, but also ward off this cancer now. And it's just that like immense stress, and you're trying to go in all these different directions and fix everything at once, and that's so stressful. And I think, I always tell patients, just focus on one thing at a time. If you can just do one thing and master that, then go to the next thing. But it's, there's so many things that we know, and no one's perfect. No one's going to eat perfect. No one's going to, never get Oreos from that aisle that you shouldn't go down. I think, or exercising more and all that counseling and stuff like that. It's just so hard because it's a lot of stuff to think about. But if you kind of do one thing at a time, sometimes I feel like that helps. And then also talking through this with someone, going to counseling or doing something. Sometimes you spend more energy thinking about what if and trying to get through things. If you just call and schedule, it almost ends up being that time, kind of like that 10 minutes that you were talking about. You're devoting that time in your day to coordinate, that it doesn't feel like it's so overwhelming because it's not impacting your whole day. If that makes sense.
Totally does. And I saw several really positive comments. I love the support that you all are giving each other in the comments. And it really reinforces sometimes, and I think this is like our culture. Like we say, I'm 110% in. Dude, you can't be 110% in. There's only 100%, or like sports, I was all, 110, I give 150%. No, dude, you've only got 100% to give. Sometimes good enough, 70% is still passing, right? Like, it's sometimes good enough is just good enough. And sometimes I recommend that for folks as well, to really think about, because we have this buzz of like the new normal that happens. And some people are really like just resentful of like, I don't want to embrace a new normal. I want my normal. Screw the new normal. I want my normal. And many times there are aspects of your life that can get back to that, but you are forever changed whether you like it or not. So I tell folks, think about what would be acceptable. So maybe it's that you used to be able to walk 3 miles with no problem. Well, maybe 2 miles, maybe a mile right now is okay. Maybe that's good enough, because it's still better than nothing. Right. And I think a lot of us, and I know myself, I get stuck in this all or nothing. Susan with great feedback. She said sometimes she's 62 and sometimes it's hard to separate the aches and pains of normal aging and is this cancer? I wish I had a phrase I could tell myself. Oh, I love that. I am a big fan of make your own mantra. So I did not come up with on my own. My best friend, who is like the most direct, straightforward, no nonsense woman in the entire world. We've known each other since we were 9 years old. So we have lived through middle school, high school, marriages, babies, elder parents, all the things. And she'll say to me, it's okay, because your most half hiney effort, like half a cheek, is still better than a lot of people's all in full hiney effort, which is kind of crass. And I'm toning it down because well, we don't say Heine, but you know what I'm saying. Sometimes
Tiny.
like give yourself the grace to be like, you know what, this is my all in right now, and it is okay. And I think once you give yourself permission, I think folks tend to make more progress, because when you give yourself permission to be like, eh. So I think finding a mantra, and like sometimes it's song lyrics, sometimes sometimes I see stuff in like the t-shirt shop that I'm like, dude, that makes so much sense. Right?
Yeah.
Finding something that really resonates, or book quotes. I saw somebody comment that they have a lot of things to let go of, and it's scary. That's allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to let go of things. And I had a patient tell me once, and it was the most beautiful analogy. She struggled with panic attacks a lot. So during treatment, almost every time she had a radiation appointment, she would have a panic attack. And then she was continuing to have them, not quite as frequently, but still pretty often after she had concluded treatment. And she said, because it started to get less and less often. I said, what changed? What are you doing different? She said, well, I thought about the panic like a wave in the ocean. And I could either let it crush me on the beach, or I could get on a surfboard and just ride it. And the minute she thought about, like, she visualized that panic like a wave, and she just decided she was going to, in her mind, ride that wave, it passed so much more quickly than if she fought it the whole time. Because I think about that, and not that I tried to surf, Lord, it was a not pleasant experience for me and anybody else that had to witness it. I'm sure it was not a pleasant experience, but like, it's much different when you're trying to harness that energy and ride on top of it, as opposed to when you're standing there and, I'm always the one that turns my back to check my kids when the big wave comes in, and I always wind up getting slammed in the sand, because I'm worried about the kids, every single time, every vacation it happens, but when you go with the flow instead of resisting it, can be really helpful. So,
Yeah.
any other questions?
What you were saying with giving yourself grace, I think a lot of patients that I see have a hard time with that. And if this was their friend or a family member, they would definitely give them all this grace and this respect, and like they would give them this, I don't know what the word is, but they're harder on themselves, and I think it's just really challenging to I don't know, to look at yourself and be like, I can't be perfect. That's not acceptable for me to think that, and I wouldn't think that for anyone else. So why am I so hard, to try to pull it back and realize that we're all just doing the best we can.
Yeah, if you wouldn't say it, like, because our internal dialogue can be so much crueler than anything we would ever say out loud. So if you wouldn't say it out loud to another human being, to another person, don't say it inside to yourself, which I know is easier said than done.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm a big fan of talking out loud to myself, which my family makes fun of me and I don't care. But like, when I get really, like, when we have a lot going on and I get a little bit more anxious, I often think that I have forgotten to put the garage door down. So I will say to myself when I'm pulling out, I am putting the garage door down now. And my kids laugh at me. They're like, Mom, what are you doing? I said, just saying it out loud checks it off the list of things to worry about. Yeah. I love Tammy's advice. Talk to yourself like you talk to your mom, your sister, or your daughter. Yes. And I love Nicole's comment. Nothing you did gave you cancer. It was just some damaged cells that you treated and survived. Just keep that in your mind, that it was just bad luck. And the only thing we can do is live the best way we can. Yes. I love that. Yes.
And Georgia, I wanted to kind of mention, some people were mentioning your slide about strategies.
Yes.
And how to the coping and everything like that. And I really noticed the several points on that slide: movement, nurture yourself, set limits, guided imagery. And that's why I wanted to also remind the participants tonight is that this is really what survivorship and then access to resources like Cancer Family Care offer. the cancer support community, the resources for access to movement opportunities, whether it's Tai Chi through free services, a wellness fitness program that's free to you as well, guided imagery. Our previous wellness series was about sleep, and we did a whole guided imagery, so that's available on the website as well. So a lot of people were mentioning how great that slide was, so I wanted to give you kudos for that as well, because that was really, it hit a lot of points that people recognized in just small incremental steps.
Thank you. Yes, and certainly, I mean, like, don't try to like decide you're going to become a vegetarian or only eat clean and start yoga and, you know, like pet shelter dogs for 3 hours a week. Like, don't try all those things at once. Again, give yourself grace. And certainly if that was not how you were wired before you had cancer, don't try to make yourself fit into that mold now. You know, and that's another strategy that I didn't mention, but I think is worth saying. Most people have had some sort of experience that they would describe as negative or something they wouldn't want to do again. So think about, what did I do to get through that before? So first of all, acknowledging, like, I'm kind of tough because I got through some hard times in the past. How did I get through that? You know, so really thinking about, because a lot of people have coping skills that they don't even realize are coping skills. You know, or I've had people that had very high power careers and could be very decisive and go with the flow or change based on the trend in their business, but they're saying, I feel paralyzed. I don't know what to do now that I've been sick and I don't do that. It's like, well, you already are super great at delegating responsibility. You're really great at communicating with a team. Here's what I need. You know, I tell anyone who's been a parent or an aunt or a grandparent, you know, or an uncle, that you've had to keep a small human alive, you have all of the skills you need. Or an animal. I saw somebody sitting with a Westie when they logged on. I'm a dog lady and I love Westies. I'm obsessed, and eventually someday I will have one. But like, whether it's taking care of your fur babies, you know, you have all the skills you need to figure out how to problem solve and move on to the next thing. So remind yourself, you know, like, I have done hard things before. What did I do to get through that? You know, I personally tend to make really inappropriate jokes about what's happening, usually in my head, but sometimes they come out and I'm just as surprised as everybody else. But sort of laughing through hard things, or music is a big go-to for me. So my family knows, based upon what kind of music I'm listening to when I cook dinner, how stressed I am. And for me, like, and I tell all my coworkers, for whatever reason, when I get super stressed out, Barry Manilow and the Copacabana are what pop in my head. So if they walk in and I'm singing Copacabana, they know to leave me be for a minute, because I got some stuff to work through. Right. But if we've got Motown on, or we got some dance music or bluegrass, like, we're fine. You can come in the kitchen. We can hang out. But if we're dancing to Copacabana, I just need a minute.
Yeah, music is one I think that we kind of forget about. Oh, the Calm app.
That's a great suggestion. I often wished it could be piped into the radiation treatment room. What a great suggestion.
I'm writing that one down.
I think totally take that to the big cheeses.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yep. I have used the Calm app, and what I like about it, it also uses that, how much time do you want to spend? So you can sort of choose the duration, or they have like before bed. I really love those before bed sort of things. So.
Yeah, and like you said, it only can, you know, if you want just like a 5-minute like relaxing thing, or a 10-minute, you can pick and choose the kind. And I don't know, I think a lot of times it's one of those things that you feel like you don't have time to do, or you just don't, but then doing it and kind of starting to put it in your routine, it's actually not too bad once you kind of start doing it, and then you end up liking it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know mindfulness is sort of like a trendy kind of word right now, that we should be mindful about things. But I tell folks, even if you need like a 15-second, like, you gotta get a grip kind of moment, I always tell folks, take both of your feet and put them flat on the floor. And so like I'm doing it right now because I always sit with my ankles crossed, but like just straightening out your body and putting both feet on the floor and just taking a deep breath and in your mind thinking, I am connected. I am connected to the earth. I am not going to spin off out into space, which is what it can feel like when you're stressed, but I am connected and I am grounded. I can't even, that has done wonders, and it, or you walk into the doctor's appointment, and I find that when they make you sit up on that table and you're like swinging your feet, you're like, you really do feel like you're floating out there. I never sit up on a stupid exam table unless they make me. I sit in the chair and I will sit with my feet on the floor. It's like, okay, I'm here. I am grounded. It is okay. So that would be a quick tip, especially folks will say, well, I can't get my mind to quiet down long enough to meditate. I will tell you, if my mind gets quiet while I meditate, I fall asleep. My mind, it's like all these little thoughts pop up the whole time and I just kind of let them do their thing. But then again, just like writing it, it sort of purges it and lets it out. So don't be afraid. Don't be a perfectionist in your meditation or mindfulness or your prayers. There's not really a right or wrong way to do it. Just try what feels comfortable for you. I am not like a sit cross-legged on the floor kind of girl. I sit on my front porch with my feet up on the rail. Any other questions?
And I think too,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you feel like you don't know, what you feel, kind of that anxiety or any of those emotions, and you don't have a handle on coping mechanisms, that's where, if you don't have friends or family, just call us. We'll help figure it out for you. We'll point you at least in the right direction, just so that you're not just kind of swimming by yourself, and that there are people there that will sit and help you and try to at least point you, like I said, in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then,
go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sometimes folks will say, well, how do I know that this is like anxiety or that it's not something else? And I always tell folks, just be mindful of where you feel it in your body. So some people feel it in their stomach. For me, I feel it in my shoulder blades, like in that space between my spine and my shoulder blades will get so tight that I like walk around. It's like, what's happening? It's like, oh, I probably need to like shake that out. Like I hold all of it there. Some people get headaches, clench their jaws, but just kind of progressive relaxation. If that's not something you've ever tried, I recommend that. So that's where you go through like each part of your body. I like to start at my toes and work my way up, but there, you can start at the top, but you clench those muscles in your feet, hold it for like 5 or 6 count, and then let it go. And then you can do your calves, work up to your thighs, your butt muscles, your stomach. You clench your fists and your arms. Your face is kind of hard because you kind of squinch everything all up, but you go through your whole body. And then I always tell folks, like, do your whole body, just like tighten everything up as tight as you can and hold it for like 10, and then just blow a big breath out, and you will be surprised at how noodly and relaxed you will feel. And that's something really quick you can do while you're laying in bed or if you're sitting in your cubicle, to really help, sitting on the couch, chilling out while you're watching your shows. Those are all things that you can try. It doesn't have to be a project. It doesn't have to be a class that you go to. I mean, you can do a lot of these things on your own.
All right, do we have any more questions? Doesn't seem like it. Oh,
I see the dots.
Dot.
I both goes outside like, see dots.
Oh.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. And then we also, so these 4-part series, what we did was, like, last year we took a survey of all our cancer patients throughout Christ and what are their top concerns or what they want to learn more about. So sleep was one of them. This fear of recurrence was the second one. And then the other two that was like just top topics, I guess, is that fatigue, the lingering fatigue that happens after treatment, and then nutritional, whether it's weight loss or weight gain, and helping kind of with that dietary portion. So the rest, the fatigue and the diet stuff, I know the dietary will be in January for the New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. So, but keep an ear out and an eye out for our next topics if you are interested in looking at those. And yeah, Georgia, I'm so thankful that you could join with us tonight, and it's super helpful and such a an under talked about topic. So
Thank you for having me. It was my
Yes.
absolute pleasure.
all right, well, thanks everyone.
All right. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for having me. Shoot me an email if there's any questions that trickle in afterwards.
Oh yeah, and we will have
You're welcome.
our emails are on there. So
Perfect. Oh, I see them
all right,
all.
bye.
Oh, see ya.
Bye-bye.